The air in the Nuvian diplomatic nexus shimmered with tension. Set atop a newly risen artificial isle in the heart of the equatorial ocean, the nexus stood as a marvel of architectural synthesis, shaped from earth-grown alloys, translucent Veldrin crystal, and bioadaptive panels coated with Thalaxian ginseng. At the center of the grand chamber, Chancellor Elira Von, Earth's newly appointed High Commissioner for Interstellar Relations, stood poised in front of a semicircle of alien delegates. Despite the riot of colors, forms, and pheromonal signals swirling around her, Elira remained still, focused, and crucially, smiling. The smile made the Thalaxian envoy nervous. "You want to do what, Chancellor?" asked Envoy Kelrix Varn, his obsidian-scaled carapace cycling through rapid pulses of indigo and yellow, a Thalaxian display that humans had come to understand, signified equal parts panic and profound diplomatic confusion. "We want to host an interstellar cultural and innovation festival," Elira said, her voice as calm as the still water surrounding the nexus. "Here, on Nuvia, with open invitations to all sapient species, not just a Court of Stars members." The silence that followed was not merely quiet. It was loaded. Across the room, Archivist Ren Solari, one of Earth's leading xenoanthropologists and the de facto cultural translator, cleared his throat. Including non-accord species, he clarified, independent civilizations, nomadic fleets, even former raider factions, anyone willing to engage peacefully. "Even the Dravari?" asked Ambassador Sale Telkin of the Meridian Consortium, his plumage flaring in either indignation or curiosity. It was often hard to tell with the feathered Volari. "Especially the Dravari," said Commander Tarek Dern, Earth's military advisor to the delegation. "We've already shown that even pirates can become partners when given alternatives." Standing just behind Kelrix, Liaison Mila Zeth, the Thalaxian cultural attaché to Nuvia, vibrated with barely contained enthusiasm. Her scales flashed radiant violets and sunlit golds. "Imagine a gathering where ideas aren't throttled by legacy hierarchy, where the unknown can meet the established as equals." "Chaos," muttered the Alderaanian delegate, his crystalline limbs clicking in displeasure. "Productive chaos," Elira countered. "Managed, measured, liberating." Kelrix's scales had cooled to contemplative blue now. "You realize, of course, that the Accord High Council would never officially sanction such a gathering. It violates half a century of protocol on interspecies tech exchange and tiered development safeguards." "That's why we're not asking," Elira replied, her smile sharpening. "We're simply hosting a cultural festival. Anyone who wants to attend may." Kelrix blinked his inner eyelids in the Thalaxian equivalent of an incredulous head shake. "A loophole." Ren offered a shrug. "We call it creative diplomatic interpretation." There was a pause, one of those slow, hanging moments in which history seems to hesitate before taking a step forward. Kelrix's scales shifted again, to a hue humans now recognized as reluctant curiosity. 2 Nuvian years ago, the envoy said slowly, "I would have called this dangerously naive. But after the Dravari incident, and how you turned raiders into trade partners, I admit my perspective has evolved." He raised both hands in the human style he had adopted, mimicking an open gesture of camaraderie. "The Thalaxian delegation will attend. Formally." Gasps rippled through the assembly. Moments later, the representative of the Veldrin Collective, a species older than Nuvia's continental plates, signaled their agreement with a crystalline chime that resonated through the chamber like singing glass. One by one, other delegations followed, some with trepidation, some with barely concealed delight. "Then it's settled," Elira said at last, her expression unchanged, though Ren could practically hear her internal victory lap. "The first annual Interstellar Cultural and Innovation Festival will begin in 6 Nuvian months. We'll initiate galaxy-wide invitations immediately." As the delegates filed out, conversations erupting in dozens of languages. Envoy Kelrix lingered with Alira, Ren, and Mila. This festival, he said quietly, could very well unravel the Accord structure. The hierarchy exists for a reason. You're proposing an open platform with no oversight. The established species will not take this lightly. Alira met his eyes. Then maybe it's time the galaxy stopped hiding behind sanctioned gatekeeping. Look at what we've accomplished just by opening the door. The Horizon Spire network has expanded by 300%, Ren added. Our joint labs have produced more tech in 2 years than the past 2 decades combined under Accord protocols. Not to mention, Mila said with a mischievous glint, the cultural cross-pollination. Have you tasted Thalaxian human fusion cuisine or seen the kinetic sculptures at Moondrift Nexus? Kelrix exhaled a soft, rattling sigh. Amusement, this time. I must admit, those kinetic sculptures are impressive. Then imagine what happens, Alira said softly, when the entire galaxy is invited to share. Kelrix didn't answer. He simply turned and walked to the panoramic window overlooking the ocean. The water shimmered with twilight reflections, human cities and alien vessels framed together in silver and gold. Dancing in the rain, he said finally, half to himself. Sorry, Ren asked. Kelrix turned back to them, his scales glinting with amused gold. It's a Nuvian saying yes, to embrace uncertainty instead of avoiding it. More or less, Alira said. Then perhaps, he murmured, this galaxy needs a little more dancing. The central pavilion of the festival grounds, officially titled the Harmony Atrium, though most humans had taken to calling it the Hub, was still under final construction when the first misunderstanding nearly brought the entire project down. A gold-lit evening breeze swept across the vast structure, brushing through hanging banners that shimmered with the languages and emblems of 47 species. Beneath the glowing canopy, chaos brewed, not the anticipated cultural chaos of art, cuisine, or shared invention, but a much more familiar brand, the diplomatic kind. 2 delegations stood in a tightening circle of confusion. One, towering and broad-shouldered, bore fur-laced with bioluminescent filaments that pulsed with electric urgency, the Ursari. Beside them, the Volari, bird-like beings with radiant crests and sharp, elegant movement, flared their plumage in visible agitation. They roared at us. The Volari representative snapped, his translator struggling to convey the insulted indignation layered beneath the melody of his natural voice. It was a challenge, plain and simple. No, came the booming voice of the leader Sari, his heavy gait rippling through the polished floor. It was a greeting ritual of mutual respect. Between them stood Chancellor Alira Vaughn, flanked by members of the Cross-Cultural Mediation Corps, a unit of trained human and alien diplomats, body language analysts, and cultural historians. They were sweating metaphorically and literally under the growing tension. I don't think either group intended offense, said Ren Solari as he jogged into the scene, flanked by Envoy Kelrix Varn and Liaison Mila Zeth, scales now shimmering an anxious gray-blue. We need to de-escalate now, before. But it was already too late for calm. Other delegations had started forming peripheral clusters. The Volari and Ursari weren't just symbols of heritage and ceremony. They were icons of 2 ancient civilizations who had, until recently, avoided direct interaction for a century. Whatever happened here would echo beyond these walls. That's when the children arrived. A dozen human school children, handpicked from Muvia's International Cultural Immersion Program, had been granted early access for educational purposes. Their chaperones, unaware of the diplomatic storm ahead, had veered into the atrium to show the kids the flags. Instead, they found giants roaring, feathers flaring, and the Chancellor of Earth standing between them, all like a peacekeeping lighthouse. A girl, no older than 9, stepped forward. She blinked at the Ursari, then at the Volari. Then she asked, in the universal translator's clear, youthful tone, "Are you guys dancing? Can you teach us?" Every diplomat in the circle froze. The bioluminescence in the Ursari's fur flickered, hesitating. The Volari's feathers paused mid-flare. "This is not dance. Small one," the Ursari rumbled. "It is sacred ritual, performed to show respect." "But you're moving to music," another child piped up. "Well, kind of music. Like thump thump RAWR music." The Volari tilted their crests. The child is not entirely wrong. Our displays are ritualized movement with meaning, which in many ways is dance. Ren Solari stepped into the space, his anthropologist instincts buzzing. In human culture, ritual movements and dance often overlap. We have ceremonies that blend challenge, respect, and even mourning through movement. "You honor with your bodies?" the Ursari asked, more curious now than indignant. "We do, especially when we want to make a new friend." What happened next would later be described by the overly formal Cultural Documentation Board as a spontaneous cross-cultural kinesthetic integration. But among those present, it was just a dance. The children began demonstrating simple human moves. A clap-stomp rhythm from a peace celebration in southern Africa. A circular formation based on an old Scottish reel. One child showed off a goofy move from a decades-old Earth meme, which inexplicably caught the interest of a crystalline Alderaanian diplomat nearby. The Ursari tried. Their movements were slow, deliberate, majestic. The Volari were graceful, airborne even when grounded. Eventually, their own ceremonial gestures adapted, looping into the human rhythm with awkward, elegant charm. Other delegates joined. The Dravari Syndicate, once feared raiders, now cautious traders, joined in with their fluid, blade-like forms. The Veldarin collective emitted harmonic pulses in tune with their geometric movements. Even the stern Alderaanians eventually flickered in rhythmic synchrony, their crystal limbs casting dazzling reflections across the pavilion dome. Envoy Kelrix watched, astonished. "Did you plan this?" he asked Elira quietly. She shook her head. "No, but sometimes the best diplomacy isn't scripted. Sometimes it just dances its way into being." Liaison Mila Zeth pulsed a joyful gold. Of course it would be children. No protocols. No history. Just curiosity and rhythm. And so, as the dance spread, so too did an idea. That evening, as the organizing committee revised the final pre-opening agenda, a new item was added, unplanned, unvetted, and deeply unorthodox: the Galactic Dance Exchange. Each species would be invited to present a movement or ritual, be it dance, motion, or symbolic gesture, and others could learn and participate. No politics, no rankings, just motion and music, as Ren Solari later wrote in his festival log. It wasn't our tech or treaties that changed the galaxy that day. It was a kid asking a question that no diplomat had thought to ask. "Are you dancing?" In the wake of the diplomatic dance miracle, the planet now known diplomatically as Nuvia surged with a purpose that could only be described as humanity in overdrive. What had once been the quiet, misty landscapes of New Zealand's South Island was now a continent reborn. Its new name, Unity Expanse. Here, human engineers, alien architects, and artificially intelligent construction swarms converged in a race against time. The Interstellar Cultural and Innovation Festival was no longer a proposal. It was becoming real, and it needed to be ready in less than 6 months. The festival grounds began as blueprints on paper, then as glimmering holographic concepts, and finally as steel, crystal, and living architecture. Entire biodomes rose from the soil like summoned worlds, each one tailored to host the environmental needs of radically different species. Some domes churned with thick ammonia air and bioluminescent canopies for the aquatic marin. Others buzzed with magnetically charged dust for the particle-sensitive etherkin. There were even floating pavilions suspended by harmonic resonance fields for the Volyan gas forms. Surrounding the domes, vast open-air pavilions took shape, built from morphing alloys that could reshape themselves to accommodate guests. A Volari representative might find their meeting room perched high in the rafters with open-wind tunnels, while a subterranean envoy of the Rokari would arrive to find their hall reconfigured into a cool, stone-laced cavern. The architecture wasn't just adaptive. It was reactive. It listened. It learned. The site pulsed with new technology. Earth's best minds had collaborated with alien inventors to create structures that hummed with ambient comfort, resonating with neural cues and responding to biofeedback. Walls shimmered with color when visitors entered. Pathways shifted when guests looked lost. Everything was alive with motion. Above, the Horizon Spire network expanded. These massive communication towers, built with Thalaxian crystalline cores, broadcast Earth's invitations into every known region of the galaxy. Chancellor Elira Vaughn's team had developed hundreds of variations of the message, customized to fit the cultural norms of each recipient. The mind-seers of Ellery received a poetic algorithm encoded in electromagnetic pulses. The Zephyri drift colonies were contacted through scent-based messaging. Even the ritual-obsessed high circles of Otrax were sent formal invitations handwritten by an AI trained in their obscure ceremonial script. The results were staggering. Delegations confirmed by the day. The Virulon Enclave, a hive-mind civilization that had previously rejected all forms of diplomacy, committed to sending drones. The Dravari Syndicate, once feared raiders, requested to reserve a commercial space, eager to showcase their newly legitimized trade protocols. Their message even included a culinary note: "We will bring food. Earthlings like food." Then came the shockwave, contact from the Eclairi Concord. 7 isolated worlds, each having chosen complete cultural silence after failed early contact with galactic society, announced their decision to attend, not individually, as a united front. For a few moments, even the usually composed Commander Tarek Dern forgot to breathe. When he finally spoke, it was with a dry, stunned grin. "We're either their favorite rebels or the galaxy's most fascinating accident." Elira didn't look up from her data pad. Why not both? But the most unexpected message didn't come through official channels. 3 days after the initial invites were launched, a new signal arrived. It bore no official tags, no encryption headers, no recognizable protocol. It was a simple message: "We have observed your gathering. We are coming." No one recognized the source. That was until 3 gleaming ships descended into orbit. Their hulls shimmered with honeycomb patterns. Their flight paths were impossibly smooth. They made no formal request, no demand. They simply arrived. On the northern watch deck of the Expanse, Elira stood with Ren Solari, Milazeth, and Envoy Kelrix as the visitors emerged. They walked with eerie precision, humanoid but unmistakably not human. Their skin glistened with iridescent symmetry, and their eyes, faceted like gemstones, moved independently. They were members of a civilization no one had ever recorded. The delegate spoke in flawless common, though its voice carried a subtle harmonic resonance, like speech layered with music. "We intercepted your broadcast. We were not invited, but we have chosen to attend." Kelrix's scales shifted into stunned indigo. "You've been observing us. For 3 of your centuries, the being confirmed. We found most galactic interactions hierarchical, dull. But this is different." Ren, to his credit, found his voice first. "Do you dance?" "We synchronize," the delegate replied with calm certainty. "That'll work," Elira muttered. Everything changed after that. New sections of the festival grounds were hastily commissioned to accommodate the now-named Omnic Helix. Protocol teams rewrote greeting scripts overnight. Engineers adapted designs. Diplomatic schedules tripled in complexity. The galactic translation network ballooned as new data streamed in. Every sign, every interface had to be remapped. Aliens with previously unknown sensory arrays arrived. Some communicated in color, others in pressure waves. Some interpreted rhythm as language. Even the cross-cultural mediation teams had to adapt. Training now included nonverbal gesture de-escalation, reactive posture interpretation, and an entirely new module called Cultural Misfire Management. One of the translators began adding polite disclaimers to public screens that read, "This gesture may not mean what you think it means." But through it all, the work continued. Banners were printed, ritual spaces were blessed, and high above it all, the beacon lights of the Horizon Spires pulsed across the galaxy, inviting anyone and everyone to come share a piece of themselves. The old galactic order had relied on walls, on rules, tiers, protocols, and control. But the Festival of Unity was built like a circle, open, evolving, daring the stars to dance. When the sun finally rose over Unity Expanse on the first day of the Interstellar Cultural and Innovation Festival, the world that greeted it was not the same Earth that had existed a few short years ago. Thousands of beings from across known space and several formerly unknown corners now filled the concourses, plazas, and biodomes. They arrived on foot, in hovering transports, through sparkling Horizon Spire gates, or by descending from organic, living ships that sang in strange harmonics as they landed. The air thrummed with multiple languages, heat signatures, scent trails, emotional resonances, and kinetic frequencies. And everywhere, woven through the chaos, were humans, laughing, hosting, translating, and adapting with the same irrepressible spirit that had sparked this entire galactic spectacle. At the center of it all stood the grand atrium, a circular amphitheater carved into the heart of the expanse, its open canopy catching the twin suns as they slowly arced across the sky. It was here that Chancellor Elira Vaughn took the stage, standing beneath an enormous crystalline arc pulsing with the glow of synchronized translation fields. Her voice, calm and unwavering, echoed across the crowd in every tongue represented. "Today, we gather not to form alliances nor to negotiate treaties," she said. "We gather to share stories, gestures, laughter, and invention. We are not here as rulers or representatives. We are here as guests of one another." Her words triggered no applause. It was a custom few species shared, but the collective hush that followed carried more weight than any ovation. When she stepped back, the real opening act began. The Galactic Dance Exchange. The very idea had once sounded like a child's improvisation, because in truth it had been. But now, on this stage, it had become a symbol of something greater. One by one, species took to the floor, offering movement, rituals once seen only in private temples or war rites, now adapted into expressions of curiosity and unity. The Ursari lumbered forward first, their movements slow and thunderous, for shimmering with internal pulses as they moved through the ritualized motions of their ancestral greeting. Next came the Volari, who soared and spun in tightly choreographed spirals, their plumage glinting like living auroras. Then came the humans, and they brought the chaos. It started with a classical waltz, adapted for multiple gravities. Then a Polynesian war chant, accompanied by stomped rhythms and synchronized claps. Then, without warning, someone started what Ren Solari would later describe as the first interstellar electric slide. The reaction from the crowd was divided evenly between bemusement, confusion, and growing curiosity. The crystalline Alderaanians, usually cold observers, attempted the synchronized step pattern with surprising elegance. The floating gas forms of the Voluians, using light-pulsing exosuits joined in shifting colors in time to the rhythm. Even the scifi, beings of sound and vibration, added an ambient harmonic layer that became the accidental background music for the entire atrium. And then, inevitably, someone introduced the jazz hands. It started as a human gesture, an ironic, flashy extension of enthusiasm. But it became something more. The Thalaxians interpreted it as a symbol of unguarded joy. The Virulon hive mimicked it with shimmering wing extensions. The omnic helix added synchronized resonance patterns that made their limbs ripple like woven holograms. By mid-morning, the festival had transformed into a cross-species kaleidoscope of movement and color. Entire delegations spontaneously broke into dance or movement-based greetings, even if they didn't understand what they were doing. There was no need. The language was motion. The meaning was connection. Throughout the day, exhibition halls opened one by one, showcasing technologies that had never been seen together in the same space. Some were carefully partitioned to avoid breaches of accord protocol, but many were shared freely. Devices that stabilized gravity fields for hybrid species. Musical instruments that tuned themselves to a listener's biology. Portable gardens that adjusted to alien soil chemistry in seconds. Cultural pavilions served reinterpreted dishes from over 80 worlds. One stand offered steaming dumplings infused with mind-calming spores. Another served bright cubes of sonic candy, dessert you could hear. A stall manned by the Dravari boasted a dish called flame fruit, a formerly weaponized fruit now bred for taste, with a mild plasma aftertaste and only a 5% chance of spontaneous combustion. Amid the swirl of experience, Chancellor Elira Von walked the grounds like a shadow in motion, never intruding, always observing. She passed through a scent sculpture garden curated by the scifi, stopped briefly at an ursari carving demonstration using claws and memory foam, and ended her circuit by watching a crystalline child from the Veldrin collective play tag with 3 laughing human kids and a floating helix drone. "That's not supposed to happen," said Mila Zeth beside her, watching the chaos unfold. Elira smiled. "Which part?" "All of it." Ren Solari appeared a moment later, holding 2 mugs, one steaming with Terran chai, the other fizzing with violet helix nectar. He handed the latter to Mila and looked out at the crowds. "We're already seeing trade overtures from the Eclairi," he said. The Dravari signed a non-aggression pact with 2 former rivals over shared dessert. And the Mindseers just offered Earth access to their ancient song archives. Milo looked stunned. That would have taken decades through Accord protocol. They said they liked the dancing, Ren said with a shrug, called it chaotic prophecy in motion. "I think they think we're some kind of mystic clowns." Kelrix Varn joined them last, his scales shifting in soft golds and pensive grays. "The assembly is watching," he warned softly, "and they are not smiling." "Let them watch," Elira said. "This is who we are." And as the suns dipped lower into the western sky, casting long shadows through alien architecture, one thing became clear: Earth, or Nuvia, had not just hosted a festival. It had introduced something fundamentally unpredictable into the galaxy, a shared rhythm, and the galaxy was moving to it. By the second day of the festival, Unity Expanse no longer felt like a temporary event. It pulsed with the steady heartbeat of something more permanent, a settlement of ideas, laughter, science, and culture balanced precariously on the edge of interstellar politics and planetary hospitality. Chancellor Elira Von stood at the northern gallery overlooking the gastrospiral, the culinary heart of the festival, where gravity-defying food carts from across the galaxy had gathered in a vast spiral plaza that curved gently inward like a cosmic seashell. Humans, aliens, and species that defied simple classification moved through its fragrant currents like explorers in a dream of spice, steam, and sizzle. The scent of grilled flame fruit clashed playfully with the soft ionized mist of zephyry vapor chowder. Hovering pods of Thalaxian algae lanterns illuminated the paths between stalls. One human vendor flipped steaming dumplings with chopsticks while surrounded by jellyfish-like entities who applauded by vibrating the ground. "Somehow," said Ren Solari as he approached, "we've turned quantum cuisine into a diplomatic language." Elira arched an eyebrow. "Is that a good thing?" He gestured toward a scene nearby. A six-limbed eclair ambassador carefully mimicked the human technique of holding a burrito, while a crystalline Alderanian assisted with translations using flashing light pulses. Ren grinned. "Depends on whether the burrito holds." At the center of the plaza, the Fusion Forge Pavilion had become a fan favorite. There, teams of chefs, one from Earth, one from anywhere else, collaborated to create entirely new dishes. A Thalaxian nutrient sculptor and a human sushi artist had just unveiled something they called shimmerals, edible spheres that adjusted flavor mid-bite depending on your emotional state. A Dravari food truck had built a small following offering raid wraps, repurposed from field rations and paired with artisan flame salt. Their branding slogan, now circulating on t-shirts, "Plunder your palate." Not everything was edible in the traditional sense. The Valian delegation introduced a series of atmospheric beverages, gases inhaled through harmonic masks that induced flavors directly into the neural olfactory centers. Humans attempting to sample them had to wear shimmering suits and undergo basic respiratory reconfiguration. Across the path, a group of Ursari elders prepared ritual stews, each dish part of a sacred storytelling sequence. Diners sat in circles as the stew was ladled into warm stone bowls, and the Ursari recounted their legends, each flavor evoking a memory, each texture tied to a lesson. Tears were not uncommon, even among species with no tear ducts. Meanwhile, chaos and bonding flourished in the Cultural Quirks Arcade, a hall dedicated to interactive displays, traditions, and oddities from around the galaxy. There, humans were introduced to the Virulon Hive's perception puzzles, where participants were temporarily linked to a group mind to experience collective decision-making. At one station, humans and Zephyri worked together to paint music on vibrating canvas. At another, a Thalaxian elder explained the meaning of the Tail Switch Challenge, which, when misinterpreted by a group of energetic teenagers, became a game of interstellar hopscotch that left half the arcade in hysterics. "Do you ever get the feeling," said Liaison Mila Seth, joining Ren and Elira, "that none of this should work, and yet it somehow does?" Ren nodded. "Every hour." The Valari diplomats attempted karaoke last night. Mila added, "They don't have mouths." They adapted by producing ultraviolet light patterns in sync with the music. It broke the translator matrix. Elira winced. And the outcome? They received a standing ovation. Apparently, the song was a human classic about heartbreak. The light pattern accidentally mimicked a distress signal, and 3 species empathized so deeply they joined in with their own cultural expressions of sorrow. "And that," Ren said, "is the most galactic sentence I've heard this week." Nearby, the Omnic Helix hosted a demonstration of synchronized motion theory, a blend of dance-coded rhythm and quantum positioning. Several human scientists in attendance declared they understood exactly 5% of it, but loved every second. Children ran through the chaos, laughing in a dozen languages, followed by AI companions that shapeshifted to match their games. A Veldarin sculpture garden, designed to reflect and refract memory through sound, was temporarily overrun when a toddler from a Waterworld species used it as a splash zone. The garden, adaptive by nature, responded by shifting its harmonic frequency to accommodate joy. That evening, as the twin suns dipped behind the bioglass towers, Chancellor Von stood before a gathered assembly of festival coordinators, engineers, alien dignitaries, and cultural volunteers. She looked out at the crowd, the steam of interstellar cuisine curling into the sky, laughter echoing between the biodomes, music pulsing from a nearby amphitheater where Volari light singers performed alongside a human jazz trio. "This isn't just a festival," she said. "It's an ecosystem, a prototype for what the galaxy could become, not through treaties, not through conquest, but through shared meals, shared mistakes, and shared wonder." "And dancing," Wren added, raising a forkful of plasma-glazed dumpling. "And dancing," she agreed, beneath a canopy of stars and satellites. Unity Expanse didn't just glow. It sparkled. They descended from the sky without ceremony, without preamble, and without a single official channel announcing their entry. No diplomatic envoy had spoken their names. No Accord registry contained their history. And yet, as three perfect hexagonal vessels shimmered into being above Unity Expanse, everyone watching knew this was not a routine arrival. The Omnic Helix had come. The ships hovered for a moment in eerie silence, their surfaces rippling like liquid chrome as if uncertain whether they were metal or light. Then, as if deciding that gravity was merely a suggestion, they lowered themselves toward the northeast landing fields, not through propulsion but through synchronized rotation, spinning in spirals too precise to be coincidence and too graceful to be entirely machine. Chancellor Elira Vaughn stood on the observation tier, flanked by Ren Solari, Mila Zeth, and envoy Kelrix Varn, who was rapidly shifting between shades of silver and green in a display of intense diplomatic recalibration. "No registry," he murmured. "No contact history. Not even myth. This is first contact, pure, unscheduled, and very public." "Then let's make it count," Elira replied, already walking toward the descending vessels with the calm assurance of someone walking into history on purpose. The delegation that emerged was impossible. 7 figures stepped from the open lattice of the nearest ship. They moved with the synchronous precision of a single organism, though each had a distinct shape, some tall and humanoid, others smaller with multi-jointed limbs, and one that floated slightly above the ground, its form shifting subtly with each breath of air. Their skin, or perhaps outer carapace, was composed of hexagonal plates, each one refracting light into a spectrum of impossible hues. Their eyes were multifaceted, and their voices came not through mouths, but through harmonic fields that vibrated into speech. "We are the Helix," said the central figure, its voice a resonance across the skin and through the ground. "We are here." Kelrix stepped forward, his movements precise, formal, respectful. "You've been observing us." "For 3 of your centuries," replied the Helix delegate. "Your galaxy's power structures were consistent, predictable, uninspiring." "And now," asked Wren quietly. "Now," the Helix said, "we observe divergence." There was a long pause. Elira finally asked, "Why respond now?" The Helix shifted colors, as if thinking in wavelength. "Because you opened the door." The Chancellor nodded once. "Then we welcome you openly to our festival, to our world, to the possibility of something new." Behind them, the crowd gathered, aliens and humans alike, diplomats and civilians, vendors and volunteers. Word spread fast. The mysterious Helix was not just real, but present. They had not arrived with pomp, but with intention. Later, they would be assigned a diplomatic suite, but for now they were led deliberately into the central pavilion, the same chamber where days earlier Dance had rewritten a diplomatic standoff. And as they stood beneath the great glass canopy, something extraordinary happened. A human child, part of a school group on a walking tour, approached the Helix. She stood silently for a moment, peering up at them, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. Then she raised her hands and began to move, not chaotically, not randomly, but slowly, mimicking the synchronous fluidity she had seen as they disembarked. Her arms swept outward, and her fingers curled inwards like spinning stars. A pattern, a rhythm, an attempt to speak their language without saying a word. The helix paused, then answered. Their bodies shimmered with soft harmonics, and they matched the child's movements, refined, echoed, then gently expanded. Others joined. Humans, Thalaxians, Volari. A spontaneous kinesthetic echo spread across the floor. Envoy Kelrix whispered to Alira, "They are testing us, not with weapons, with reflection." "They're not just visitors," Wren murmured. "They're a mirror." Hours later, in a closed diplomatic session attended by a select circle of representatives, the Helix offered their first formal words to the festival. "We were not invited because no one believed we were watching, and yet your openness compelled us. This gathering is not what the Accord believes diplomacy to be. It is not a treaty. It is not control. It is vulnerability. And for the first time in centuries, we see merit in that." The words struck harder than most declarations of alliance. They were not overtures of allegiance. They were not threats. They were something far more dangerous to the old order. Interest. Word spread faster than light across the Accord networks. The Omnihelix, once a ghost story, now a reality, had chosen Earth as their first contact point, and not through protocols or assemblies, but through a festival, a dance, a child, back in Unity Expanse. Alira sat alone in the northern gallery long after the Helix had returned to their ships. She looked out over the biodomes, the food plazas, the amphitheaters where hundreds of alien cultures had gathered not to bargain, but to simply be. "You realize," she said aloud to no one in particular, "this changes everything." Kelrix, stepping beside her, replied softly, "You haven't just rewritten diplomatic procedure. You've broken the illusion that it was the only way forward." "Good," Alira said. "Let the galaxy feel uncomfortable." "And the assembly?" She smiled, tired and resolute. "They can RSVP to the next dance." It arrived not with the subtlety of a political nudge, but with the thundering finality of a dropped gavel. At precisely mid-cycle on the fourth day of the festival, the secure communication lines embedded in Unity Expanse's central diplomatic hub lit up with a priority signal. Not from an envoy, not from a member world, but from the highest authority in the known galaxy. The Accord of Stars High Council had issued a summons. Chancellor Alira Von entered the comms chamber flanked by Envoy Kelrix Varn, Commander Tarek Dern, Archivist Ren Solari, and Mila Zeth. The room darkened as the holographic interface activated, its center glowing with the rotating sigil of the Accord, 9 intersecting orbits around a holocenter. Then they appeared, 9 holographic projections, each representing a founding species of the Accord, formed a semicircle above the floor. At the center, poised in weightless judgment, was Grand Arbiter Zelvarzan, an ancient Thalaxian whose scales had faded to silver and whose voice had long ceased to be questioned. "Chancellor Von," he began, skipping pleasantries, "we have been observing your festival." Alira nodded. "I assumed as much, Grand Arbiter." "Then you understand why we are concerned." A second projection, Counselor Venn, crystalline and unreadable, spoke next. "In a matter of days, your planet has established diplomatic contact with no fewer than 17 non-Accord species. You have facilitated cross-dire technological displays. And most notably, you have conducted unauthorized first contact with a civilization previously unknown to the Assembly, the Omnihelix. With respect, Alira began, Earth is not formally bound by Accord contact protocols. "Not yet," Venn said sharply. Another counselor, this one a gaseous being in a containment field of shimmering glass, added, "This kind of unstructured interaction destabilizes centuries of careful regulatory order. Species are sharing unfiltered culture, unrestricted knowledge, and uncontrolled access." "That's the point," Ren Solari muttered. Zelvarzan raised a scaled hand. We are not here to debate philosophy. We are here to offer terms. The room fell into silence. Elaborate, Alira said, voice steady. You will be offered full membership in the Accord of Stars, Zelvarzan said, with all protections, privileges, and responsibilities that entails. In return, your planet, Nuvia, will adhere to established protocols regarding interspecies interaction, technological dissemination, and first contact procedures. And if we decline? Commander Dern asked. The Grand Arbiter did not flinch. Then regulatory measures will be enacted. Horizon Spire restrictions, technology trade embargoes, diplomatic downgrade to provisional status, observation status for any ongoing initiatives. In short, Alira said slowly, you'll isolate us. Counselor Venn answered coldly, not isolate, contain. For the preservation of stability. Wren stepped forward. What about the species we've already engaged? The research exchanges with the Eclairi, the trade treaties with the Dravari, the cooperative missions proposed by the Helix. All interactions will be reviewed and, if necessary, routed through proper Accord channels. So, filtered, Mila said quietly. Alira turned toward the holograms. With all due respect, this isn't just about protocols. You're reacting to something deeper. Kelrix's scales shimmered beside her, a flickering blend of empathy and resignation. They're reacting to fear. Zelvarzan's voice did not rise, but it pressed into the room like gravity. Fear of chaos. Fear of collapse. The Accord has endured millennia precisely because it controls the pace of integration. And now, Alira said, you see a dance and call it a threat. No, Venn corrected. We see what the dance represents. There was a long pause. Then Zelvarzan concluded, you have 30 Earth days to consider the offer. Full membership or containment. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. The lights in the chamber flickered back on. Silence. Wren finally broke it. Well, that wasn't ominous at all. Kelrix looked at Alira. They're not entirely wrong. The galaxy isn't ready for the kind of openness you've introduced. Then it's time it learned, she replied. Dern crossed his arms. Do we comply and lose what we've built, or resist and risk being shut out? We find another way, Alira said immediately. Mila blinked. You have one in mind? Not yet, she admitted, but that's what we do best. We improvise, we adapt, and if we have to break a few sacred bureaucracies along the way, so be it. 30 days, Wren repeated, to convince the galaxy that connection is better than control. Or to prove that it already knows, Alira said. It just needs permission to admit it. Outside, the festival roared on. Children laughed. Light shows danced across crystalline towers. The Helix synchronized with a group of Ursari elders in a curious hybrid of ceremony and mimicry. Cultures mixed freely, dangerously, joyfully, and in the heart of it all, Earth, or Nuvia, stood at a crossroads with one hand extended and the other clenched just enough to defy collapse. The galaxy had offered them a cage with silk-lined bars. Now, they had 30 days to build something better. For 3 days following the Council's ultimatum, the energy across Unity Expanse shifted. It wasn't silence, not on a planet hosting the galaxy's largest cultural convergence, but something subtler, a held breath, a shared question rippling through every species in attendance. What would the humans do next? Inside the Festival Command Pavilion, the mood was anything but still. Chancellor Alira Vaughn paced across the circular strategy room, where curved glass walls displayed real-time data feeds from across the expanse. Notifications streamed in constantly, new arrivals from the fringe colonies, diplomatic proposals from previously isolationist worlds, even an offer from the Dravari to open a permanent trade port on Nuvia. Everything pointed forward, and yet hanging over it all was the shadow of the Accord's decision: join and obey, or face containment. Two paths, said Ren Solari, seated beside a table where holographic models of the Accord's hierarchy hovered midair like a bureaucratic constellation. We accept their terms and gain access to millennia of infrastructure, but lose our soul, or we go it alone and risk everything we've built. There's always a third option, Elira said, not looking up. Commander Tarek Dern leaned on the edge of the room's holographic display. We're calling it the Mosaic Path, he said. Kelrick's coined the term. Instead of fitting into the Accord's template, we propose a decentralized alternative built on collaboration, not control. Fluid alliances, open knowledge flow, no central authority. Kelrick's perched at a quiet terminal, his scales softly flickering in aquamarine patterns, added, it would mean forming something that hasn't existed before. A network of equal nodes. Earth, the Helix, the Eclairi, the Virulon Enclave. Autonomous but linked. A galaxy where culture evolves together, not from the top down. Ren frowned. You're talking about a revolution. I'm talking about reality. Elira said, it's already happening. We're just the first to admit it. Outside, the festival continued to defy expectations. New collaborative exhibitions emerged almost daily. A joint research team of human, Veldrin, and Helix scientists unveiled a prototype for harmonic terraforming, a method of adapting land to diverse biologies without ecological collapse. The Ursari and Valari hosted a shared storytelling ritual that drew thousands. The Solitary Worlds Council, once considered galactic recluse royalty, proposed a shared education initiative with Nuvian universities. People weren't just attending, they were building. But with each step forward, the pressure grew. The council's watchers were present now, disguised, polite, but unmistakably recording, analyzing, reporting. The weight of precedent hung heavy, like a cloak of tradition stitched too tight. In response, Elira made her move. She called a summit, not in secret, but in the open, atop the spire of confluence, a platform suspended over the center of the expanse like a star above the gathering. Representatives from every attending species were invited. Not all would come, but many did. There, in a space ringed by banners from across the galaxy and backlit by twin suns and floating data screens, she stood before them, not as Earth's leader, but as a participant in something larger. We've been offered two paths, she said, conform to what exists, or be cut off from it. I propose we build a third. The murmurs were immediate. We call it the Concord Mosaic, a voluntary, interlinked alliance of knowledge, culture, and cooperation. No hierarchy, no tribunal, no membership fees, she added, and a few delegates chuckled. Just the willingness to listen, learn, and share. If your world believes there is value in connection without domination, join us. If not, that's fine. This door swings both ways. Is this a declaration of secession? Asked a crystalline representative from the Accord Loyal Worlds. Elira's voice remained calm. No, it's an invitation, the same kind we've extended since this began. The Helix delegate spoke next, its voice chiming through the crowd like layered wind. We will participate as observers, collaborators, and test cases. You have our rhythm. That line would later become a rallying cry. The Eclairi followed, then the Dravari, the Zephyri, even the Veldrin collective, long known for their neutrality, raised their glimmering appendages and signaled consent. Not everyone agreed. Some left, but most stayed. That night, the stars above Unity Expanse glittered brighter than they had in decades, amplified by an atmospheric field tuned by Virulon drones to reflect ambient sentiment, the emotion most present, hope. In the command pavilion, Ren poured 2 cups of something hot and untraceable, He handed one to Alira as they stood by the window watching dancing lights flicker over a biodome. "You know they'll come for us harder now," he said. "I know," she replied. "Do you think we'll make it?" "I think," Alira said, "we just gave the galaxy permission to imagine something better." She raised her glass toward the shimmering skyline, to the third path. Ren clinked his cup against hers. To the mosaic. When the council issued its 30-day deadline, they hadn't accounted for the fact that humans would respond with choreography. Not protest, not defiance, dance. It began with a single event, technically unauthorized, fully unsanctioned, and profoundly unforgettable. A flash performance in the middle of the Unity Expanse's central promenade. Humans, Valari, Ursari, Dravari, even 3 Helix delegates, all moving together in synchronized chaos, drawing from dozens of cultures and none twisting interstellar tension into a kinetic display of joy and refusal. The performance ended with a moment of silence. Then thunderous applause. The footage went viral. Accord networks scrambled to suppress it. Within hours, the pirouette protest, as it became known, had spawned over 50 offshoot demonstrations. Zero-gravity waltzes in the biodomes, teleportation-synced tango chains, bioluminescent flash mobs on rooftops. And everywhere, across the galaxy, people began to ask the forbidden question: why not us? In the Cultural Dynamics Dome, a round table of historians, artists, and sociologists attempted to explain the phenomenon. Dr. Millari of the Eclairi Concord called it kinesthetic diplomacy. A Helix researcher described it as nonverbal mimetic defiance. Ren Solari, sipping tea while rewatching one performance for the 5th time, shrugged and said, "It's just humans doing what they do best, moving forward and dragging the rest of us with them." Back in the command pavilion, Chancellor Alira von wasn't celebrating. Not yet. The Accord's response was still unknown. The Helix had warned that older systems do not break cleanly. They bend until they snap. They'll try to co-opt the movement. Kelrick said quietly as he watched a group of Dravari and Ursari attempt a line dance in front of the Fusion Forge pavilion. Wrap it in protocol. Rename it. File it under cultural outreach and pretend it was their idea all along. "Then we stay a step ahead," Alira replied. "We make this uncontainable." She wasn't speaking metaphorically. That afternoon, she called a meeting not in a hall, but in an empty performance dome. She didn't sit at the center. She stood, and so did everyone else. "We are not a rebellion," she said. "We are an invitation, and we are extending that invitation to anyone willing to dance." What followed wasn't debate. It was movement. One by one, each delegation shared a motion, sacred, ceremonial, celebratory. The crystalline Veldarin rotated with sharp geometric elegance. The Marin twisted their limbs in flowing underwater spirals. The Valari leapt and soared and shimmered. Even the usually stolid Ursari stomped with slow reverence, paws heavy as drums. And the humans, they connected them. They found rhythm between contrasts, steps that bridged contradiction, movements that weren't logical but felt right. Every sequence, improvised or ancient, had a place in the larger whole. A new language, one that moved. It was recorded, broadcast, archived, and copied. By the next morning, impromptu pirouette assemblies had started on stations orbiting the Helix core worlds, in the gardens of Eclairi scholar shrines, even within Virilon hive minds where motion was replicated in electrochemical pattern instead of limbs. The Assembly Council issued its warning the same day. All unauthorized interspecies gatherings will be reviewed for compliance violations. It only spread faster. Somewhere, someone scrawled it across a banner. "You can't embargo a dance." That phrase echoed through the biodomes that night as a unity-wide celebration unfolded, not organized, not declared, but inevitable. a response not to the council, but to everything else, to possibility, to fear, to joy, to each other. Chancellor Vaughan stood among it, watching as a Zephyr luminary conducted a light show that pulsed with the heartbeat of the crowd. A child with omnic helix pattern bands on her arms spun in tight circles. Two Volari and a Dravari twirled in tandem, feathers and blades catching reflected starlight. Kelrix approached with slow steps, his expression unreadable, but his scales alive with soft golds and silver. "They're rewriting diplomacy," he said, "without writing anything at all." Elira turned to him. It was never about words. The accord was built on fear of collapse. We're building on trust in transformation. Ren joined them, still catching his breath from a dance with a bioluminescent librarian. "And if the council doesn't like it, then we pirouette right past them," she said, and she did. Later that week, she would send a message to the Assembly High Council. Not a letter, a recording, a 2-minute sequence of delegates, scientists, children, artists, ambassadors, and strangers, all moving in rhythm across every corner of Unity Expanse. Each one carried a simple title beneath them. We're already connected. The message needed no further context. It arrived. It played. And for one brief moment, even in the coldest offices of the Accord's oldest powers, no one moved. The final day of the festival dawned bright and breathless. From orbit, Unity Expanse shimmered with unnatural beauty. The biodomes reflected like gemstones, the festival structures alive with motion and sound. Ships lined the atmosphere in waiting rings, some diplomatic, some curious, some perhaps calculating the risk of association. Every Accord observer had stayed. None had intervened. Yet, inside the council pavilion, Chancellor Elira Vaughan stood at the edge of the open balcony, sipping tea that had long since gone cold. Below her, thousands gathered, humans, aliens, beings of shape and shadow, light and rhythm. No one had instructed them. No schedule had been announced. They simply came, because the galaxy knew something was ending, and something else was beginning. Elira set her cup down and turned to her team. Ren Solari, sleeves rolled up, carried an armful of data pads and cultural summaries. Mila Zeth's scales gleamed with fierce gold and soft violet. Commander Tarek Dern stood like a statue, hands clasped behind his back. Envoy Kelrix Varn sat in the corner, unreadable, every scale dimmed to contemplative blue. "We're not responding to the Accord's message," Elira said. "We're replacing it." Ren arched an eyebrow. "With what?" "With something they can't override. A declaration not in law, but in action." She stepped out onto the grand convergence stage, the same platform where she had first proposed the mosaic. This time, she said nothing. Instead, she danced. Alone at first, a slow, deliberate movement drawn from 100 cultures, and none. A human step, a Thalaxian spiral, a Volari bow, a helix pulse, and then others joined. Mila, Ren, Dern, children from Muvia, visitors from the solitary worlds, even the crystalline Veldorans, who had no joints but mimicked the movement through refractive light. Soon, the stage was full. Then the plaza, then the platforms above, and the gardens below. The helix delegates synchronized through complex refractive pulses that sent harmonic echoes through the atmosphere. Zephyr light dancers flickered across the rooftops. The Ursari pounded out rhythms that shook the ground. And humans danced in a way no algorithm could predict, pulling every thread into a tapestry of motion. Across the galaxy, feeds exploded. Screens lit up. Even Accord worlds tuned in. Not because they were ordered to, but because the galaxy itself leaned forward and watched. The mosaic wasn't a treaty. It was a rhythm. That evening, as the final suns dipped into Unity's sea, a message arrived, Not from the Accord. From elsewhere. From hundreds of systems now sharing data openly. From research collectives who had never before collaborated. From nomadic fleets exchanging cultural songs. From remote observatories using harmonic compression fields to send visual responses. Movement patterns, holograms, signals made of motion. It wasn't a rebellion. It was a new orbit forming. Later, Wren found a Lyra in the quiet reflection dome. The stars overhead swirled in simulated gravity, echoing the rhythms below. You know what they're saying, right? He said. What? That the Accord Council is split. Half wants to shut us down. Half wants to rebrand and claim it was their idea. Elira smirked. Let them fight over it. You think we'll survive this? No, she said. I think we'll change. And we'll make sure the change is worth surviving. Kelrix Varn entered then, silent as ever. He stood beside them, watching the stars. When I first came to your world, I expected repairs, he said. Instead, I found something kinetic, unsettling. And now, I find I don't want it to stop. Elira glanced at him. Then don't. Together, they watched the feed. 1,000 worlds, 1,000,000 species, and one rhythm building. A revolution not made of fire or conquest, but of beat and breath and blur. A revolution in rhythm,